Can you listen to me as well? I think so. Yes, perfectly. Nice.
Sounds good. All right. So let's start our webinar, right? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a huge pleasure to be here talking to you. I would like to thank so much Disal for the invitation. All right, it's a huge pleasure to be here sharing some ideas with all these brilliant minds that are attending our webinar now, that are here with us. All right, I hope that our ideas will shed some light on how to promote some interaction in the digital world. So, my name is Alex, all right, and I have been a teacher at Cultura Inglesa for over 2 years, two and a half years. And I'm also graduated in letras, all right, like languages. I also hold a CELTA, train the trainer, TKT, and Anaheim TESOL certificate, and also I would say that it's another graduate course in ELT from University of Minas Gerais. So I'm here today with my partner, Rafael. And please, Rafael, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. I'm quite young, actually. I'm just 25 years old. I've been in the ELT world for about like 5 years and a half. So probably you might be like longer than me, but the idea is like we can share ideas, right? And we can learn from each other. Yeah, so my graduation was in translation, and now I've been working with Corpus in my master's degree, and then I've been working for Cultura Inglesa for about 5 years, actually. So it wasn't 1 year in another school, and now I've been working at Cultura. So basically my whole life of teaching has been at Cultura Inglesa, right? So yeah, so I think like we can start.
Awesome. Okay, so there we go. And something that I think it's worth of mentioning is the fact that we are part of the e-learning department of Cultura Inglesa too. All right. So Rafael and I, we take part in the e-learning department for developing some projects there too. So, and just moving on a little bit more, I hope that everyone can see my screen, right? Okay, I hope so. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so to start with, I would like to highlight what you're going to see in this webinar. So it's going to be like in a webinar that will focus on practical activities. So we are going to go over some stages of our lessons and highlight some aspects on how to do some ways of interact during the lesson. So the things that we selected here, all right, are the following. So different types of interactions, so platform-oriented ones and people-oriented ones. So about the use of different kinds of platforms that are available online for us. So after that, we're going to focus on the role of interaction at Cultura Inglesa, that is the environment where we have been working for some time. So, and also we're going to highlight the views of technology that we have in the company and the learning too. So focus on the lesson. We are going to like separate some different parts of our lessons. So leading and warmers, engagement. So it's going to be our first stage that we intend to cover in this webinar. So besides, we're going to go through the holistic noticing. All right, that it means that it's the part of the grammar that we're going to like highlight aspects of grammar and how we can make those moments that sometimes they are a bit difficult to conduct in class in a way that it's more interactive and so that students could participate more. So almost last but not the least, we have the following one. So practice, we're going to focus on practice. How can we make practice more interactive in the digital world? And last but not the least, this is the one. So we are going to be sharing some takeaways and Q&As. So there will be a moment for you to make questions so that we can answer, all right? And we're going to be here to answer some of your questions. So something that we would like to highlight at first is the fact that nothing is set in stone. So everything is changed. So here we're going to present ideas that might come in handy when we're preparing your lessons. So Rafael, I would like just to give you some time for you to talk, and it's with you now, okay?
Yeah, sure. So let's go. So we are going to start with the types of interaction. So that we have here platform-oriented, and then we also have people-oriented, which means like through online platforms. When I'm talking about platforms, I'm talking about like the ones that you might know or might not know. So for example, Google Jamboard, Google Docs, Zoom Chat, for example, Pear Deck, Padlet, Quizlet, Poll in the Zoom as well. And then we have Mural, Quizzes, World Wall. So some of you know these ones. Some of you like have been working with these ones. I particularly use Zoom, for example, Padlet, Quizlet, and Google Docs, right? So these are the ones that I use the most. So you probably use some of the other ones. And they are very similar to one another, right? So some of the characteristics, some features that we have there in that platforms, we can also find in other ones. So we might have some references over here. And then this is the platforms that we can use to make some kind of interactions in our lives, in our lessons. And then we also have here through a platform with people. What does it mean? That we have people over here, and then we have the platform, and then the platform is a bridge, right, that connects people, like would be like our students, and the content that we are trying to teach, and then make this more collaboratively, and so on and so forth. So moving on a little bit, Alex. We have here interaction with a platform, because when you're talking about interaction, I can interact with the platform and I can interact with people, and then I can use the platform to interact. So you have here like 3 types of interaction that can happen. When I'm talking about like interaction with the platform, as you can see here, you have this faces, not faces, but this kind of people here, and then we also have some boxes, the black ones, which means that we have people interacting with the platform. We have one person interacting with another one. We can have like 2 people interacting with one, like Jamboard or whatever, or we can have the full class, like the whole class, interacting with one platform. So if you think, for example, in our lessons, we have Zoom, and then all of the students are connected to Zoom. So everybody's using the platform to learn, right? Or if they are connected to the Google Docs, we have lots of students like sharing one document, and then they are connected there, right? But they are interacting with the platform. And if we consider here at Cultura Inglesa, we have some ideas, we have like some beliefs that we consider when we are using technology in class. So it has to be, in number 1, as stated here, as you can see, pedagogic oriented, which means that I don't use the platform for the sake of using. So for example, I like a Kahoot. Oh, I'm gonna play Kahoot, for example. No, it has to have like a meaning for them to use. So it's pedagogic oriented, so it has a meaning, right? So they are using this to learn, not just for like playing. Of course they are gonna play, but there is something behind, right? Also, it has to be collaboratively. If we think here like we have the platform and then the student interacting with the platform, this is not collaboratively among the students, I'm saying, right? It's collaboratively like online and the student, let's say. So it has to be used with students and the platform. This is what I'm saying here. In number 3, for example, we want to foster learners' communication skills. So again, we are not using the technology or this platform for the sake of using this platform. We want to have like them to communicate orally or in a written way. So, but they have to use, and then they can use their devices to do so, or we can like have other things for them to use, but we have to foster this kind of communication skills. So they need to practice speaking or writing or any other thing like through this platform. And 4th, we have here, we must promote inclusion. How we are promoting inclusion? By helping us to bridge this social issue that we have. So if you think of this pandemic situation that we are living, Zoom has been used to bridge this gap that we are having of lacking like this communication, this face-to-face communication that we have. So using technology in this way, if we think, right, in the case of the students, it might help them develop like other skills or gaps that they have like in using this kind of platforms or not knowing how to use this technology, so on and so forth, and also to help us as well. So can you move? And then here we think, what do students gain from using this platform? So if you're using this in a pedagogic-oriented way, they get familiar with the tools because they are practicing vocabulary. They are learning to learn because they become more independent when they are doing so. They practice writing, reading, listening, sub-skills. So they practice lots of things and not only using this platform. So this is a consequence that they have. They get familiar, and then it becomes models to be used in our daily basis. So for example, if they learn how to use Jamboard, for example, they might replicate this to their work environment so they can use this, and they create more things. So actually, when you are using these platforms, the students can create content that I'm going to talk in further details in a moment, but they can use this to create and generate communication, right? Interaction in this platform here, okay? And then, so when we consider the idea of interaction, we need to bear in mind that we have the platform interaction, so students interacting with the platform, or we can have interaction with people through the platform, right? So, and then here I'm talking about two people talking and then using a platform. This is the biggest thing. So we want students to use the platform to communicate. Again, written or orally speaking, right? And then in between this, we have the content. So students, they are interacting with the platform, and at the same time, they are generating content that will lead them to be talking about that content that they generated. So this is the way that we believe that a platform should be used. So students interact individually or can be in groups, but they will be generating content so they can be used. So it can be used in a later activity for them to practice, right? So they can discuss about what they produced in class, and then it can go for discussions, and so on and so forth. So this is the idea of interaction that we are going to present to you. How can we maximize, how can we use this platform to generate content, and then students can actually practice in a more meaningful way. So they can go to a breakout room, for example, and say, oh, okay, I have something to do. I did something. I know why I'm using this platform and not just for the sake of using again, right? So moving on. So using the technology again, so we need to have a clear purpose for why we are using this. So there has to be a relevant context for what I'm going to use when I use this kind of platform in my lessons, right? So I need to say why I'm using. Again, we don't use just for the sake of using, right? So it's pedagogic oriented. And then they have the, in these platforms, they are exposed to the language they use, the context which relevant to them. They have the opportunity to check their understanding of how language works through interaction again. And then they give the opportunities to use the genuine use. When I'm talking about genuine use of language, it's not controlled. Because when I give a task to a student, it's controlled, right? So they are controlling. I'm controlling depending on the task, of course. When I ask them to answer a question, this is less controlled because they have to answer something and then they are using a genuine use of the language, right? But when I give language for them to use, vocabulary and everything, this is a lot controlled. When I don't give anything and the students need to produce something, this is the genuine use of the language, right? And then we want students to try to express themselves genuinely, right? Not mechanically or automatically in this way, robotic way, let's say. And language is seen as a means of communication. So they need to be presented with language that they are going to use in a genuine context, right? So they need to be able to use the language to communicate, okay? And not just learning one vocabulary here, one vocabulary there, and then they don't speak, they don't write in a full sentences or whatever, right? So moving a little bit. Exactly. So this part here is going to be Alex talking to you, okay? Which is phases of the lesson.
Thank you very much, Rafael. All right, and I couldn't agree more with you. So in order to use the platform, there must be a reason. So it's not for the sake of doing, as Rafael mentioned before. So guys, I noticed that there were some questions in the chat box. So I have just shared with you the link for our presentation. So you're going to be able to access if you feel like. So the link is already there. Besides, I think somebody also asked us, so why don't we use Moodle? So we can also use Moodle. I think that what we can point out here is the fact that it's a question of choice. So in the beginning of our presentation, we shared a list of different platforms or different ways that you can use online for improving and using during the lessons. So, and I believe that Moodle is also one, but we didn't highlight it here, but it's also possible to be used. So regarding this aspect, the focus on the lesson. So there we go. So when you come to think of our lessons, we have some stages. For instance, the very beginning one, we are going to be talking about the contextualization. So that is the moment that we're going to share and really tell the students what they are going to be checking and what they're going to be studying during the lesson. So it's going to set the mood of our lesson too. So later on, there will be the exposure. That is a moment that they will be like, there will be a text or perhaps a listening activity or something like this that they are going to be practicing during the lesson. After that, so we have the holistic noting that is totally connected to the exposure. So the point is, during the holistic noting, students are expected to work on grammar, all right, aspects of language that were highlighted during the exposure moment. So later on, as you can see, there will be the practice that can be divided like free practice, freer practice, and controlled practice for sure. And depending on the lesson, there will be an objective, the skills development. That could be, for instance, the one I have here. This is skills development focused on speaking. But perhaps on your lesson, it could also be like writing and I don't know, perhaps any other activity, all right? So any other skill that you can also develop during the lesson. So as I said before, this is not something that is shaped and that is the way it is. So perhaps your lesson is going to be a little bit different than mine. So you're going to focus on the freer practice and then you're not going to be able to finish and do the skills development, for instance, like the freer practice of your lesson, for instance. So, and the point is, what we would like to highlight is this question. Should we maximize interaction at any moment of our lessons? What are the setbacks of maximizing like contextualization and not perhaps like the practice moment of our lesson? So there will be causes and consequences that we have to assess while making our choices. And this is something that we're going to highlight during our presentation. So, and moving on a little bit more, yes, we are going to be talking about some specific activities. For instance, this is an activity that I prepared for an A2 level. So the platform that I have been using, that I used for preparing this activity that is in a warmer, like the beginning of our lesson. So I use Google Jamboard. And Google Jamboard, so it's a tool that allows you to do many things. So since my students were practicing the have you ever, all right, the present perfect, so I came up with this idea that I want to share with you right now. I have already opened before. Yes, that is the one. I hope that you can see it. So is that okay? Everybody can see it? Just to make sure. Yeah. Yes, lovely. Thank you very much. All right. So the point is, guys, it seems quite simple, and yes, it is. So present perfect versus simple past. So the point is, in order to maximize interaction at this moment of our lesson, what I decided to do, the students are supposed to come up with numbers and letters, and they should move the cards. For instance, I will move this one. Eaten sushi. All right, so have ever eaten sushi? So, and they can ask each other. However, it wouldn't be so meaningful for them if there wouldn't be any kind of follow-up question. And then I emphasize the fact that there is a set of follow-up questions that they can use during the lesson, during this stage of the lesson. So, and by using that, they could practice, besides the present perfect, they could also go further and practice some simple past. So some examples in the simple past too. So, and that is that provides the students with some sense of achievement, because they were also able to practice the content of the language, they went further, and they felt comfortable using the language. For sure, after this stage of the lesson, there was a feedback moment so that I could share some ideas and tell them how to improve and etc. All right, this one I shared with my students via a link. For example, Google Jamboard allows you, like when you click here in partilhar, or right, share, so you can share the content with your students. And this is the way I did. This activity, this prototypical one, could be used with any level. For example, if you have like an advanced level and then you want to practice conjunctions, like, wow, so you can also prepare this and then you can share with your students too. The point is, guys, everyone, sorry, is the fact that we are going to be sharing this activity too. You're going to have access to this one so that you can make a copy, and perhaps it can come in handy when you are preparing your lessons too. All right, let me just go back to our presentation. Just a second. Here we are. Oops. Okay, all right. So this is the first thing that I want to share with you. But moving on, I want to go to this part. So, Rafael, would you mind going further, this one?
Yeah, sure. No. So let's go. So when we are engaging students, so we might find, for example, in listening or reading activities, questions for them to get into the topic. So to get engaged, that would be like leading activities. And then here in this one, level C1 would be like advanced one. You have, do you do any kind of handcrafts? How are they? And have you ever tried origami? And what did you make? So these questions here in particularly, we would like go directly in our mind and saying like, okay, I'm gonna ask students to talk about these questions, and then we would come back. If you are using Zoom, you would probably set students to the breakout room, they would discuss these questions, and then they would come back, and then you would elicit from students what they talked about. Another way that you can do to maximize students' participation in a way that it's engaging and more meaningful, let's say, that might be, okay, let me modelize here, might be. You can ask students to first answer these questions here on the chat or whatever platform that you are using. So you have a record of their production of that. After, you may ask students, for example, take a photo here, so you can have this as well. And then you ask students to go to the breakout room, and then they talk about everybody's. So even if I am just talking with Alex here, I'll be talking about Sabrina, or talking about João, or whoever person this is. I have access to this answer, and then I can talk about. And then in the end, we need to have an activity for them to come back. So just eliciting the questions, I don't think this is enough. So what's the conclusion that they take of it? So lots of people do handcrafts. It can be a conclusion. For example, if how many people like tried origami? So this one here as well. So in the end of this activity, they need to come back knowing that they have to tell something to the teacher, not just like, okay, let me share what I talked here with my group. And then some here will talk, some there will talk as well. But if they know that everybody needs to have the same conclusion, they need to tell something, it becomes a little bit more meaningful if you have this kind of activity redesigned in this way, right? So this is one suggestion that we have to engage students. The other one, for example, this is a B2, which would be like upper intermediate student. And then the book is presenting the vocabulary, like awful, catchy, which is related to films and books. They present this vocabulary in a way that they just need to do this exercise. And then students need to match these words to the sentences. And we automatically would do, okay, teacher gives the instructions, and then students, they open the book, and then they do the activity, and then the students check in pairs probably, and then the students tell the teacher their answers, and then we clarify if they are right or not. That would be like the normal procedure that we would follow a lesson. but we can do this in a way that students can work collaboratively, and then they can discover this together. So instead of doing this, you can ask students, let me just see one thing. Can you move to the other one, please, Alex? In a way that the students can do this in a more collaboratively way, you can ask them to highlight words. So for example, boring, easy to remember, and the other ones. And then they need to find together words that are synonyms, right? So they might, you might teach them chunks to negotiate as well. So you can tell like, okay, so I think boring is this one. And then what do you think about this one? So you are teaching them here some language for them to practice actually together, because some of them, they don't know what to do when they are in pairs, right? And then they don't see relevance to do that. And then I super understand students, because we don't tell them why they have to do that in pairs, right? So it needs to be clear for them why they are doing that. Also, students can write next to the number example for those sentences. So after they have completed this exercise, they found the words together, you clarified the meaning of these words and everything. So they can write some examples to this. So for example, what is boring? What is easy to remember? What's funny? What's hilarious? Weird? Over the top? So on and so forth. So they can have some examples individually, of course, or might be in group. It depends on your lesson plan. And then students share, and they can find someone who has the same opinion as theirs. So for example, here, I can have here, oh, I think like Star Wars, this is my opinion, okay? I think that it's Star Wars might be a little bit boring, for example, but some people find it amazing. And then this is my opinion, so it's very different from the other student. So they might have here, find someone who, and then it becomes like you are maximizing this interaction that the book is not bringing to you. So you need to think outside the box. How can I use this exercise? Not reinventing the wheel, not producing more exercises, but using this one and maximize interaction through this one, right? This one here, I'm just using the book. Can I use a platform? Yes, right? So I can use either with a book or the platform, which is the next activity. Can you move, Alex, please? So if I want to use a platform to maximize this interaction, I super can. So for example, I can say, it does nothing for me, it's quite boring, quite dull. This is the first sentence from the exercise. Students can go there for on the Jamboard platform, and then they can write examples. They write examples over there. So Star Wars, sertanejo music, talking to people about books, right? So sertanejo music, this is something that I love, and particularly, but some people, they hate it, right? So we are gonna have like everything over there. And then students with their own devices, or if they are in an online platform, not seeing all the students, they can use this Jamboard, see everybody's answer, and then they can talk about everybody, right? And then it's super maximized. So we got from one exercise that they needed to complete, from one interaction that they have to speak, they have to write, they need to use language genuinely because they are giving their opinion. They will probably justify why they said Star Wars or sertanejo music. So this is one way that we can do, either with the book or with the platform, okay? The other one is, yes. So now Alex is gonna tell you something about pronunciation.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Rafael. And I couldn't agree more. I think the fact that you can have an activity that you can use in different ways by using the platform, or even like keeping the book and using the activities from the book, this is amazing because it's all about adaptability. So according to your students' needs, you can change and follow a different procedure. So the one that I want to share with you, it's also using the platform. I will be sharing everything that I will be sharing with you. It's connected to platforms, all right, that students can interact and use during the lessons. The one that I want to focus now is called Miro. I don't know if you are familiar with, but basically Miro is well known for creating like mind maps. And here I created one for practicing pronunciation. This is a C1 group, all right, and according to the Common European Framework. And I want to just show you how it is. Just a second, I have already opened this before. So basically, how it worked in class. So the main point is students should practice like the intonation. All right, so tag questions, all right. So, or they would focus on checking what people understand. And also here, like, let's have a look. So agreeing, not exactly a question. For example, but the point is, I realized that if they just listen and repeat, it might not be that meaningful. So it would be just a question of practicing, repeating, and saying. So, and I believe that when a student is using the tool and really moving the things that are provided on the platform, that are available, that are there to be used, it's somehow more meaningful for them, and like it somehow activates their long-term memory. So, and what I did in lesson was the following. I had this activity that I had prepared before, okay, with all the sentences that we would be working with. And I nominated one student in class. So I was lucky that this group was not that big, all right? I had like, as far as I can remember, 7 students or 7 to 10 students. And then I nominated one student who would be able to move these arrows according to what they listen. So that was the moment of interaction, because they were all together interacting and asking what they thought. So what do you think of this? Don't you think that it would be a good idea to say that this is rising intonation instead of falling? So, and that was a simple activity that they did that could also be adapted to be used at Jamboard, for instance, if you think that this Jamboard would be easier to be used or something like this. So, exactly. I think Maria is sharing something quite interesting that is going beyond grammar. It's not a question of just focusing on grammar and how to use it. It's like using language to learn language somehow too. And that was the main purpose of this activity. And somehow some students were engaged in the platform, and they like it so much how to use Miro, and they started using on their daily basis. This is something that is quite funny, because we are also teaching the students that using online tools can be useful on their routines. So, and moving on, all these activities are available in our slides for you. Let me just show you, go back to our presentation. Oops. Okay, just a second. Okay. And moving on, I would like to share another activity. All right. This one, is still focusing on grammar, all right, holistic noticing. It's a C1 level also, all right. But this one I decided to be using the Google Docs, all right. So students were asked to be practicing how to emphasize sentences, emphatic language. So, and there were 3 kinds of emphatic language that we would be using in class. For instance, there were cleft sentences, how to emphasize sentences using just the auxiliary verbs, and etc. So, and then what I did, I created this Google Docs and shared with my students. So they would be able to access the file and then share their ideas. I think if I open the file and show you here, it's going to be better. Let me just, give me 1 second, zoom in. Okay, is it better to see somehow? Oops, I think it was way too much, I'm sorry. Okay, is that okay? All right, so thank you. All right, so the point is, guys, I was using guided discovery. All right, they would be practicing together, discussing, all right, interacting. So in small pairs, small groups, by the way, and they were supposed to read the sentences and come up with different forms of using and saying those sentences. And here they came up with examples. So, for example, here there was a sentence with no emphasis, and they had to think, how could I emphasize the sentence? How could I make it in a different way? So it's exactly going beyond the grammar, going beyond teaching grammar. It's not just a question of teaching, you have to use this, you have to use that. So the point is, you are not telling your students, you are moving your class from teacher-centered, I am the one who is talking, but actually to student-centered, because they are thinking, they are spending some time reflecting upon language, so thinking of possibilities to come up with different solutions. All right, so All right. I think Rita has a nice question. How do you form groups using Google Docs? The point is, Rita, in this case, I have already created this file. It was one file for group one, as you can see here. It's written group one. So, and I created 3 different files. All right. So, as far as I can remember, in this group, it was 3. So that I could have trios in each one of like the breakout rooms of Zoom, for instance. They were together working in different files. So it sounds a little bit a daunting challenge or things like this, but actually it's not. It's a question of Control-C, Control-V, because and renaming the file. There were 3 different files that I told the students to access through a file that I shared online, a folder I shared online, and I told them, so you guys, you are going to access the group number 1, group number 2, and group number 3. All right. So I think the point is always preparing them before the activity and making sure that they know exactly what they are going to do during the lesson. Okay. So, and oops, just a second. Let me just go back here the way things were. Okay. And moving on a little bit more. So yes, I think this is one activity that Rafael has prepared. So
yeah, this is me again.
Okay.
Okay, so this is for advanced students, but obviously you can adapt this kind of activity to the levels that you are teaching. After you have presented the language to your students, they will probably have to practice this somehow, like in a written, a controlled way, in a less controlled way, in a more speaking way. So they will practice in a way. And in this particularly one here, we have working groups use past modal. So the language being taught here is past modal. So should have, might have, must have, and the other ones to speculate about their past, things in the past, actually. And then here we have lots of questions. How did people wake up in the time before there? And then we go, so on and so forth. In this one here, we can say to students, so for example, okay, read the questions, check if you understand the questions, and then let's go in pairs, and then you can answer these questions, right? That would be automatic to our mind here, again, like to say this to students, to have this kind of interaction, this pattern of interaction in our lessons, but we can scaffold this task a little bit more. As we are working with past module, this activity here, for example, can become a drilling exercise before. So what did people wake up? So do they know like how to use wake up in the participle? So do they know that it's waking up? So keep, do they know the participle? So students could work collaboratively first to discover the participle of these verbs before. They would drill the sentences, how to answer, for example. Yes, people should, people might have waken up, so on and so forth. So you are drilling with them, so you are preparing them for the task. So when they actually go to interact with each other, they know what they have to do. So scaffolding a task like this one, it's extremely important. Also, you should give them some time for them to think of their answers. And then for that, they can do individually or they can do collaboratively. You can put them in group, think of these answers here. What can we say here? Brainstorm ideas to say. So they are working together, they are using that language genuinely. And then after, you could like move the groups again, so generate new groups. And then they could talk about their answers. They could speculate a little bit more using the language. So scaffolding here is an important part. Also, we can stop the task here, obviously, but we can go a little bit more. We can ask students to ask more questions using how did people. So here they practiced with these questions that the book gave to them, and now they can ask more questions. So you're maximizing in this way. And then for that, you can create a bank of questions. So students can type their questions in the chat. You can open a Google Docs, and then you can share with the students, and then they can write their questions there. You can have a Jamboard, a Padlet, but students are using the language in a more genuine way, and then they are generating content, again, generating new questions to be asked when they are like communicating with their peers, right? So this is a way that you can work with this exercise like in a more traditional way or in a more like maximized way, right? Yes, I think that's it. And then here, if you are teaching like basic students, for example, this is very tricky, very challenging as well, let's say. But sometimes we have like reading or listening exercises they need to complete with true or false. They do the activities, they check together, and then that's over. We can teach them like how to work together, because at this point they still don't know how to actually talk to each other, how to share their answers. They will probably talk in Portuguese to share their answers. So if you don't teach like language, we don't give language for them to communicate, they will probably speak in Portuguese. So this is the way that we can reduce Portuguese in the classroom, for example. And then here we have Great Britain is an island. And then this is true or false. One student might have marked true, the other one might have marked false. And then you can give them a mini dialogue here. So for example, and then you can teach them questions. So Great Britain is an island. So you just teach them like, oh, if I want to ask a question, I invert here is in Great Britain. And then they can go for this dialogue, for example. Is Great Britain in an island? Yes, I think so. No, I don't think so. So you can teach them these chunks for them to share their answers. This is meaningful because they are trying to practice the language. They have a purpose for sharing. So they are learning how to ask questions, but at the same time checking their answers, right? So they are doing two things at the same time. I'm not using technology here, just using the book. So maximizing the students' interaction is not only with these platforms that we have, but also knowing how to use the book and then readapting these exercises that we have here in a way that the students can communicate. Again, I would like to emphasize that we don't have to go creating flips and flips and flips of activities to have in our classes, because we are not adapting the ones, right? We're just creating because we fear that we don't have enough practice for our students. Actually, we can use only one and then we can maximize, so we can actually reinvent the task that is already there, right? So this is the greatest idea here that we would like to tell you, how to use these ones in a more different way, all right? And then I think like we have one more activity.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So there we go. Right. I was reading the chat, and there was also a question here from Rita. She asked about using platforms instead of sharing screen. So Rita, you have just said something quite interesting. For example, when you are teaching one-to-one students, as you mentioned, that this is your context, I believe that this is also, it also comes in handy, because if you think of like preparing one activity using Google Jamboard, for instance, everything that you can see students doing on the platform, so you're going to see this at the same time. So I believe that it's also a tool that can be used like in one-to-one lessons, so in different ways. The point is, focus on adaptability, so you can adapt activities according to your context. This is the main focus. The main idea that we want to bring to you today is that you can use those tasks in a way that you can like adapt according to the context that you are working on. So the activity that I brought here, it was actually a challenge. So students, sometimes I find quite difficult to work with long texts, mainly in the online environment. So even though you can share the text before in advance, like using Google Classroom or even any other tool, or even sending emails with the text that they can read and get ready before the class, sometimes you can't assure that all of your students in class will have read the text. So what I decided to do about this one, also by using Google Docs. So there was this text that was called like the paper architect in C1. Okay, this is an advanced group, and I prepared this this file. That, let me show you this again. Just a second. Oops. I should be here, and actually this one. Yes, just to show you a little bit better. Okay, to have a closer look. So, and I asked some students, or perhaps I can't remember exactly by now if I asked 2 pairs to work in each paragraph. All right, I can't remember, but no worries. So, and the point is, students would have to read the paragraph 1, skim it, and then write a short sentence that would summarize it, summarize the paragraph. They would be like in rooms in Zoom, and they would be discussing, and there they would come up with a conclusion about the paragraph 1. I believe that the most important information, the first paragraph is this, and then they would go to the folder. Okay, that this folder was shared with all the students. Everybody was working at the same time in the same folder. And what I liked the most, all right, it was also something that somebody mentioned in the chat about feedback. So students were writing here like short sentences, because it was my focus. It was skimming what we were practicing. And while they were writing, I was able to select pieces of language, for example, like this, just to come up with something. And I could click here and add a comment. So, John, I think you'd better use a different verb here. And while, I don't know, the second group was working on the second paragraph, are you sure about this information? And so I added comments. So, and they could go there and reply my comments. And by doing that, I realized that they got engaged and they were discussing about what I had written on the comment section. They were like, oh, did you see what Alex wrote there? So perhaps I think we should change. So, and that was also a way of having a different kind of support, like providing students with extra feedback in a written activity and working with a text that was somehow long and having a general idea in the end, because after having done this, I asked all the students to read the file. So now we have a shorter text with the main idea, and then we would come up with the whole picture. We have the big picture of our text here, so designed by the students, all right? There was no huge interference of the teacher, right? I was just there controlling and giving them tips where to go and etc. So, and that was a way of working with long texts in class. So I want to share a different one. Okay, go back to our presentation. I'm really sorry for going back and forth to our presentation activities, all right? So, but I hope I had made myself clear somehow. So, the other activity was also something that somebody mentioned in the chat, okay, that I think there is no English teacher that can live without Padlet, right? Even though there are different tools online, Google Classroom, etc., but Padlet always come in handy. So, actually, this one, it was an A2 level activity, all right? And the students, we discussed what was a review. So, what makes a movie special? We talked about features of movies and etc. There was also a model that they could read and discuss their ideas and etc. And then what I asked them to do, quite simple. I asked them to be in groups. I prepared this file before in advance, all right, before our class. And here it is. It's a Padlet one. But it was something, guys, something that I would like to highlight here is the fact that those activities, they are not time consuming. So, and even though, for example, perhaps one activity took more time, like 5 extra minutes or something like this, these activities can be adaptable, okay, adapted, by the way, and be used in a different level for a different group, for instance. So you have the whole idea in mind, so you can apply this in a different group. So this one I created for helping them to practice how to write summaries, how to write movie reviews. So the first one here, they selected a movie, all right, and they could, and something that I also like it, and that comes in handy and makes total difference when it comes to Padlet. They can assess the movie reviews. It was nice because they could read everyone's reviews and also like give some stars and say, oh, I like this one. They would be able to discuss, and they generated language. Because while they were in groups, like group 1 had to write about movie 1. Actually, they chose the movie and they used this for writing. So here, as you can see, there was a model. There is a pattern here. We saw. The point is, they use this pattern for developing their own ideas. So once again, so they were using language, like for discussion, besides the fact that they had to use a language for like preparing and writing something, and they could interact and reach conclusions. So the second group was pretty funny because they had they were like discussing a lot about the movie that they would choose. So, and in the end, they were not able to conclude their text. But what they could do instead of, like, because of their discussion, they could read everyone's writings, all right, everyone's compositions. So they could check and see and get in touch with real language that was produced by students. Okay?
Yeah. And if you want to go beyond this, obviously you can ask students to talk about their favorite films, so which ones they like here, which ones they don't like they are seeing here, they like or they don't like, so they can like express their preferences. And it's another opportunity if you want to give feedback in an expanded languaging, right? So expand your language, expand a student's language to talk about their preferences, for example.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more with you. That is true. So, and moving on here. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, and then guys, we're reaching our conclusions here. So, I stated this question at the beginning of our presentation. So, should we maximize interaction at all stages of our lessons? So, the point is, there are some constraints, some things that we have to bear in mind when we are maximizing, like an activity, like for interaction and etc. The point is, I think the biggest something that we must bear in mind is the fact that we have some content to follow during the lesson. So we have to think that our lesson will finish after 60 minutes or even 75 or something like this. So there is the time constraint issue. So something that we must bear in mind. I believe that the idea of striking a balance is always something that I consider when preparing my lessons. So I believe that this moment would be awesome for interaction, and students would benefit a lot from using language and producing language at that moment. So I will make all my efforts to make them practice more in that moment. However, I must think that the other activities that I will have to do later, all right, must be shorter, all right, and more punctual, in order that my lesson will have, like at the beginning, like all the stages completed during the length of the lesson. All right. I would like to comment anything about it too.
No, I think like that's okay. I think like we need to bear in mind our lesson plan. We need to think carefully which stages of our lesson we want to maximize, how we want to maximize, what is my student needing, what does my student actually need at this moment of this lesson. Is it a group that needs more speaking? So do they need more controlled practice here? So how can I do this in a more using platform and not using platform? But we need to remember that we cannot maximize every time our activities. Otherwise, we are never gonna finish our lessons. We are just like going like lesson part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, because there's always language to be taught. There is always something like that we can teach, and then we are never gonna finish this, right? And another advice that I would like to share with you, you don't need like to overwhelm your students with lots of tools. Pick one, pick two that you really like using, and explore this tool and make use of this in a more in a way like you can use everything, right? So try to use everything that this tool brings to you. So this is the nicest things. I just use Google Docs, and I don't use Jamboard, for example. I didn't adapt very well like using this one. So this is not something that I like, but you might like this one. So I like using Google Docs. I like using Padlet because I'm more familiar. And then we can do amazing things with these two tools. We don't need to bring every time a different tool, but I think like we need to bring every time a different activity, right? So we need to vary our activity. So because if you think everyone is only using Zoom, everyone is only using, if you're using the Google Teams or if you are using the Google Meets, it's the same platform every time, but it's what you're doing there that makes the difference, right? So I think like this is what we need to pay attention to. Yeah.
That's so true. I couldn't agree more. So the point is, I also agree with the fact that we have to think of something that we feel comfortable using. So that is also important. That, for example, I feel comfortable in using Google Docs, so I will make use of this during my lessons. I think there was somebody asking about private classes. I believe that those activities that I was sharing here with you, okay, that is the one. So, okay, so what about private classes? I do believe that those activities that I was sharing here with you, that Rafael and we were talking about, can also be adapted to private lessons. So you can share with your student, for instance, in one-to-one lesson, a link for a Jamboard. And this Jamboard, your students are going to be able, your student, by the way, is going to be able to like move the cards in a way that the activity that was written in the book, that was just like putting the words in order in a meaningful way. For example, by using color code, for instance, if you are teaching your students how to make questions, like using verb to be, for instance, if you separate by using colors, like you have used color code. So besides the fact that they are practicing putting the words in order, they're going to see that that word, like in blue, the verb to be, for instance, comes first, so before the subject. So they can put in order, and then they are practicing using a platform, a simple tool, and like in a one-to-one lesson. Okay?
Yes. Right. And there is another question here about when you provide them feedback. I'm going to make some comments on this, and then Alex, if you want, you can obviously say something. I think it all depends on the type of task that you are giving to your students. So actually what you want to give them feedback. Probably, if I'm doing a very controlled task, I would go for on-spot feedback, right? So I need to check if they are doing this control in a very controlled way, and if they are doing this correctly. So I cannot like postpone my feedback and then again like consume time of my lesson. So I go there, I listen, and then I give them feedback. If they're doing something like freer, it's not like so ideal to interrupt the students when they are thinking. So let them think, take some notes. After they finish, you might like give them feedback there, or you might give feedback to the whole group. I think it depends on the activity that you are doing at like in the moment of your lesson, right? So this is what we need to think. So Alex, would you like to say something about this? Or?
Yes. Yeah, you made a nice point, mainly about the fact that it varies, right, about what is the point of giving feedback. So should I correct the students on that moment? Like, should it be like a spot, feedback on the spot? So there are many things that I have to consider before that. So what I usually do with my students, so regarding platforms, I have been using Google Keep, and I have shared a note, like I have a group. Imagine that you have a group of 5 students. So you create a note on Google Keep, and all the things, all the feedback moments that you have during your lesson, you can share it there. So all your students will be able to check the feedback, everything that you wrote. So new vocabulary, language stretch, and anything that you can post there, anyone can access and see it. That is also a way, for example, for providing students with later feedback. So, for example, you were like monitoring a task, and then you realized that, so that is a good moment for providing them with some language stretch. So you can type it there, so and they can access it as and when they want to. Okay.
All right. There are a lot of questions here about one-to-one. I cannot like make any kind of comments because this is not like my field of expertise. I don't teach one-to-one, so I cannot like say, oh, do this, do that. I might have one idea, so I'll not go into this field and then say something here, right, guys? This is these activities here that we think it's all for groups. So you have like people more than 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this is the idea for these activities over here. So it's not one for one-to-one. So maybe you should think a little bit more of your own context. How can you get these activities that we are proposing over here? How can you adapt to your own context using the ideas that we have, but in a different way? I think that would be more meaningful if you reflect upon this part here that you are asking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. Do you have more questions that you would like us to answer? Oh, here, could you tell us some book title? We don't have, I don't know any book title, but we have like, Cambridge has got a website. And they have lots of teaching tips using online tools, and also like other ideas to teach grammar, young learners, reading, listening, or just talking about events. So going to Cambridge, Cambridge Learning, I think like this is the name of the website. Maybe you can find some precious tips over there. I don't know the name of any kind of book. There's one like Teaching with Technology. I think it's also from Cambridge, but I'm not sure.
I may share something with you too. I think there is the BBC, all right, website that you can also use. That is the Teaching English, all right. So you're going to find a lot of articles there about teaching online, and something that I found interesting regarding a book title. So that I found interesting somehow. So let me see if I can share my presentation again. So let me just show you guys. So can you see the presentation again? Is it on your screen? Or
yes,
are the questions? Okay, so by clicking on this link that I shared on the Google, on the beginning of our presentation, actually at the beginning of our presentation, we're going to be able to access these links that I shared with you. Let me just open it and show you. So here, there will be the slides of our presentations. If you click there, you're going to have access to this. So some teaching tools. Here I have a list of sites that come in handy when teaching online. So Classroom Screen, Flippity, all right, class tools, Calendly, for example, if you have to set a meeting with parents or things like this. So you can also find it here. Storming, that is an alternative for Padlet. And there is this one, guys, that I want to share, is Shake Up Learning. Okay. So this is a website, as you can see here, and also a podcast. So the owner of this website, all right, she has a book, all right, that is called Shake Up Learning, that provides you with a lot of ideas in her background on how to, the way she started teaching online and using tech tools and etc. Perhaps it's something nice for you to read too. So I think this is what we can share about our presentation. So is there anything else that we can help you? Okay.
I don't think so. So guys, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you could get some practical ideas that you can use this right now in your classes if you're actually going to teach after this presentation here. And we see you around.
Yes, it was a pleasure to have you all here. So see you next time.
Bye-bye. See you later.
Bye-bye.
How can we finish now? Rips.